Hey game fans, welcome back. I'm Kristen. This is Indie Game Origin. Today we are talking with two of the members from Warped Universe by Warped Games. Now, Warped Universe has been announced and you can wishlist that on Steam. If you are looking forward to some of what they're working on, definitely join them on Discord. Definitely make sure that you follow them on all of the appropriate social medias. And without further ado, let's do. Everybody, welcome back. I'm Kristen with IGO, and today we are here with Scott and Adam from the team behind Warped Games, who is in the process of making Warped Universe. Warped Universe is a game that takes place in space. You get to play through a variety of genres and a variety of different combat styles, which I'm excited to chat with them both about today. Thank you so much for joining me. Can you tell me a little about yourselves and your experience before Warped that has maybe impacted your role in this game?
Sure, I can go first if you want. So, I've been making games for 30 years, so old game developer now. Mostly done space and online games. It's kind of my genre. And doing Warped was a kind of a passion project of trying to put a bunch of different styles of games together that I really like playing into like one sort of shared experience.
Yeah, and I'm Adam, CEO of Warp Games, and I kind of have a similar history in music and audio engineering, 20 plus years there, and on the tech side. And then I met Scott on a previous project a little over 3-4 years ago, and we really liked working together, and started brainstorming Warped Universe together, and hit it off, and gathered our crews to build out this dream project.
Gathered the ranks. Well, you had mentioned before, and I also saw on your site that the team has worked on some pretty high profile projects in the past, including Lego and other titles that people might recognize. Do you feel like that experience has helped kind of shape the direction of Warped, or what the development process looks like for this game?
I mean, certainly all experience affects you as a developer. And I like to make games where I'm a big player agency fan. And so I like to make games where the decisions you make as a player affect both your character, but also the game. And, Lego Universe was certainly a game like that where people could create things and it would affect each other. And we had a lot of really fun with that. So, yeah, we've done some big stuff with EA and Disney and like lots of big stuff, and then small stuff too. So I've been as small as just me making stuff and as big as over 200 people on a team that I ran. So right now Warps is a pretty small team, but we're all close. And what's fun about this is we're all over the world. So it's, everything's virtual now. And so we've got people in England and Australia and Malta. And so kind of like all over the world.
Yeah, that's great. It's really cool to be able to utilize your experience to make something brand new, and something that really pulled me to Warped Universe, which you kind of touched on, is bridging the gap between these different kinds of play styles. Something that I didn't get right away, but as I was watching the trailer a couple times, was I got very excited about the fact that you can do either real-time combat or you can decide to do turn-based. And I used to hate turn-based strategy games until I don't even know when that when that changed, but in the last few years I've been really craving that type of gameplay. And in most of the sci-fi stuff that I've played, which I love the genre itself, there is sort of a limitation. You can't necessarily always do things just step by step in a turn-based way. How did the team come to the conclusion that it would be possible to do both strategies? It must be hard from a developmental standpoint to make both of those things possible.
It is a challenge. I mean, you're right. So when you're making a game, the hardest thing to do is how do we stand out, right? I think someone said there's like going to be 40,000 games on Steam this year. And so how in the world are you supposed to, stand out against 40,000 other titles? And so you've got to come up with something that's going to make you fun and original and interesting and, I don't know, worth your attention, right? Because we're not a AAA studio. We don't have $100 million or whatever Grand Theft Auto is now, $2 billion or whatever, right? Like, we don't have that kind of a budget. So we had to come up with a game design that was doable with a small team, but still interesting. And so the first concept we came up with was just the name Warped, and what does it mean to be warped, and we were playing with all the fun ideas of like Warped obviously has the sci-fi meaning of like space travel and a speed and, you know, like moving quickly, but Warped also has like this cool sort of like state of mind drug analogy sort of thing kind of going with it too. And so we were like, let's embrace this being weird and different style in everything we do. And we talk about it all the time. Like, we were just talking with Adam about gun sounds, and I'm like, make them weirder, you know what I mean? And so, like, we're really pushing that, like, this style is in, you know, music, sound, visuals, game design, like, everything about our game. We want it to just scream Warped, so that when someone sees our game, they're like, oh, I know that game, that's Warped. Like, that's all these things. So the game design idea came from trying to figure out a way to get more players to play your game, right? Like, how do we as a developer get as big of an audience as possible? And also, from me making space games for a long time, there's so many people that are like, it's so cool, but it's too hard for me. I don't like 3D flying, like it's confusing, like, you know, it's too tough. And so I was like, all right, well, what if there was a way that wasn't so hard to fly? And then that kind of led into, with the pandemic, I got super back into D&D again, and just D20 systems and gaming and playing that style with my friends. And so it was sort of in my head as like, I love this style of gaming. And so what we built is the underlying sort of combat engine is all stat based. It's all a D20 style system. And so all the items have similar attributes and numbers, whether you play real time or turn based. So when you're playing real time, it's kind of more like Borderlands or Destiny, like a looter shooter style of a game. But every time you fire the gun, it's doing dice rolls and putting the damage into the bullet. And then when it hits the guys have resistance and whatever else. And so it works kind of at its core like a turn-based D20 style game. The other thing is in sci-fi, I'm a huge fan of games like XCOM. And so that sort of turn-based strategic, you know, planning style. And so our turn-based ground game feels much more like XCOM than, say, Baldur's Gate, even though it's doing everything's die roll. And we've really, I think, come up with some neat ways to use dice, and we'll kind of talk about that in a minute. But like, while you are rolling dice, it plays more like an XCOM style kind of a game. And then the shooter is just a standard sort of looter shooter, like Destiny or Borderlands are good examples. And then the space game is a space action game. And then for turn-based space, it started off being just like ground, but in space, but it just didn't feel right. And so we came up with this idea of, when you think about dogfighting, you think about like maneuvers and getting on someone's tail and, oh, I did a barrel roll, or I did whatever else, and everyone kind of knows these kind of dogfighter turns. So we made it into more of a kind of a movement-based turn-based game. So where everything else is grids, it's a hex-based game, and it's all about only having a limited number of maneuvers and trying to plan out your moves so that you can end up, you know, behind and get on the guy's tail. And so it's kind of a really, like, of all of the game modes we have, it's the one that's the most unique. I don't think there's anything like our space turn-based game. And so hopefully it makes it very accessible for people who like space titles and want to take advantage, you know, like play as a part of that. And then all of those come together in this kind of meta game. So we're a cooperative game only. There's no PvP. And it's all about, each season is about building a new solar system. So that's the Warped universe, as we're building one solar system at a time in this new weird wacky universe. And so each season it's about like uncovering the map and exploring space and finding new planets and doing research missions, and all of these things build up together. And so like the buffs and the power curve, if you will, of a season is not just individual, it's also communal. So everyone working together like invents a new gun or improves how much damage, you know, this spell does, or makes spaceships a little bit faster, and then those improvements are sort of shared across everybody. But then if a factory that builds this thing gets destroyed, then it's also lost for everybody. And so it's everybody playing together kind of over a season to kind of see all these things happen. Sorry, that was a really long answer, but that's sort of Warped Universe in a nutshell.
Oh, that's great. Because yeah, I that's something that really drew me to the game is that I am a huge sci-fi fan, but I am a sucker for TTRPGs. Like I've in the last few years, I've gotten really interested in many of the different systems. D&D being the well-known classic. But what I love about D&D and tabletop games is that yes, traditionally they've been treated as sort of high fantasy games, but you can actually apply those mechanics to an infinite other group of worlds. So for me to see the two things sort of married together, I was like, hell yes, like this game was made for me as a player. And I think has a massive opportunity to create a new genre. I hadn't realized that the combat had shifted for the space fights, the not ground fights that were happening, because originally in the trailer I had seen that it was almost a flat plane, as you mentioned.
It is, and it's a grid, but it's when you're a player, you can sort of like, I mean, especially if you've played like D&D, like Baldur's Gate or something, right? You can turning to face is like a free action, right? And so you can turn anywhere and move any direction instantly, which makes sense for someone on foot, but it doesn't make sense for someone flying a ship. So in the space, it's all maneuvers and flight paths, and you're thinking about like, flying in behind the guy or jumping past them or trying to bank around, and you're using asteroids and stuff for cover. And so there's a whole system to sort of planning out your moves and trying to think where they'll end up. And then you also, like in turn-based, you can shoot in any direction, but in space you're fixed. You can only shoot forward. So it's really much more strategic about like how do you line up your ship and your shots and everything. So like I said, it's turned out to be pretty fun at first, because everyone was like, this doesn't, it's basically just, you could just be characters but change them to spaceships and it wouldn't be any different, and it just didn't feel right. And so kind of getting that dogfighting style, I think, has been really fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Space chess with the maneuvers.
Space. Oh, I like that, space chess. What has that been like for you? Adam, you mentioned you were doing some sound on the game, right? What has that been like for you to try and make how do things sound in space? Especially in an environment where we're trying to make things kind of wacky. Maybe wacky is the wrong word, but a little bit unusual.
Warped. Yeah. There's a lot of like people, audio engineers argue about like realistic or just getting fun with it with space. If it was in space, you wouldn't hear anything. And so when you watch movies, it's, they defy science. And so with Warped Universe, we can kind of make up our own science and create our own rules and get as wacky as we want to be. If you listen to sounds like on movies of when they film underwater, it actually doesn't sound like that underwater. People can't recreate what it sounds like in underwater with microphones and stuff. And so movies and sound engineers have kind of just evolved it into what sounds cool in a movie underwater. And so that's kind of how I'm thinking about it with putting it in space as well. It's just we can make up our own rules. It's a completely different universe that has different laws of physics that we can just adhere to however we want and be creative and fun with it. There's literally no rules. We can just do whatever we want and make our own physics to it. So that's what's exciting to me is breaking the rules. Really, that's I've always done that in the studio with music, with mixing and production and stuff. Like I don't like following, the old guys in the studio saying like you have to do this or you have to do this. For guitars have to have this frequency. It's like no, you can. Now kids have laptops and they're making the most creative music in their bedroom. And not following any rules, and now they're like making pop songs and then in the charts because of it. And I feel like we can do that with other mediums with game audio and stuff. So and Warped Universe allows us to kind of lead into that and make fun, creative, weird stuff. And it's not just with the sound. Like every day going on the game dev calls and seeing like the artists and the visuals, the stuff they're doing now we haven't even released yet. It's incredible. It blows my mind. It doesn't look like anything else I've ever seen. And I remember when Scott and I first started talking about creating Warped Universe, one of the main things was, let's make something that if you take a screenshot, no matter where you are in the game, you'll know it's Warped Universe. Because there's so many games that look alike, and like, especially space games, it's all dark space, gray ships. Like, how can we make something in space that looks like Warped Universe? And ever since we've said that, I've been trying to think of how can I do that with sound as well. And I think everyone's kind of thinking that way in every possible sense of the game.
And they're hard to come up with too. So like think about like the TIE Fighter. Remember the TIE Fighter example we talked about? Like so TIE Fighter in Star Wars is this super iconic sound. Everybody when you hear that sound, and I don't know what that sound is it like a lion roaring or I don't know what it actually is, but it's like
no, it's
like this
it's
super
an elephant
iconic
screech
thing.
and it's like an elephant screech and in a wet cement. They drove a car over wet cement and combined it. I think that's what it was. Yeah.
So it's like it's coming up with that. It's like how do you define that? Like where do you put it in your design doc? Like I need elephant and wet cement sounds for our enemy spaceships. But like that's the kind of idea of like that's just a great example of like someone who did it so right. Where you hear anyone would hear a TIE Fighter sound and you would know exactly what you're hearing as soon as you hear it. Super unique, right? And I mean, what does a spaceship sound like? We don't know, right? It sounds like whatever we want it to. And so that's what makes this like, it's both challenging, but it's also really fun as we're trying to be like, all of our stuff should be that way. And so like, I remember the day that we got Doppler working with Adam's latest enemy ship sounds. I don't know if you know what Doppler is, but it's like, it's the sound thing where sounds moving towards you sound different than sounds moving away from you. And so once we got that going and we had spaceships flying around us and you'd hear them like the zooming by you and stuff, like it was awesome. It was an awesome moment. I remember like we worked a long time to get just that one part of the game to feel right, and like it was really cool when we pulled it off.
That's incredible. Yeah, I never even thought about, trying to make redshift, blue shift sound correct in a game. And I think that's one of those things that now that you bring it up, I think it's one of those subtle things that players don't necessarily notice. If it's done right, I can't remember who said that, but I went to school for graphic design and visual art, and there's that famous quote that good design is design you don't see. And that's that you're not aware of because it just functions so seamlessly that you're not aware that anybody even had to do anything to make it exist. And I think that that's incredible to hear, and I'm very excited to wear some headphones and really experience the immersion of being in that space, because it sounds like it's been both fun and challenging to create the entire environment that players are in. And something I'm really excited about as well is something we talked about a little bit ago, that player actions impact how this world changes. And I'm curious, how does the player autonomy, how does player interaction with the environment, how might that shift the world that they're in?
Sure, I can explain it. It's probably too long of an explanation, but I'll explain it. So when you first come into the game, and we could probably give you some screenshots or something so you can reference some of this stuff if you want to see some of these things after the call. But when you first come in the game, I wanted it so that when you come out of the portal, you're kind of standing up and you're looking down at the solar system. We call it the system map, and it has, I think right now it has 90 something sectors, which are just little hexes, right? And when it starts off, there's not very much discovered yet. So it's just kind of like there's the star in the middle and some sectors around it and one planet. And so as a player, you have a bunch of choices at the start of a season. So you can do exploration maps on the edge sectors, and then each time you do it, just imagine instead of you finishing exploration, you move the percentage slightly of that sector being explored now. And then there's different kinds of missions you can do inside of there, but those are space missions to do exploration. Once it's explored, then we set up something called a pylon defense network, which is kind of like if you think of like the old Protoss from StarCraft, kind of like they're building like a pylon sort of shield. And so you've got to build up this pylon network. These are these fun missions where they're a combo of space and ground, where you can kind of fight inside the space stations or fly around outside of them. So it's kind of our ideas of trying to mix the game modes a little bit. When that's complete, then the sector is safe, and either you discover a new planet or you discover what we call residuum, which is basically mass in our game. So we have our version of mass and energy is residuum and warp particles. And so that's how everything in our world is created. And so residuum is sort of like the building block that everything is made from. And so when the residuum shows up, that's where you have like mining and escort missions, your kind of space missions where you have to take the residuum to the space station. and then the space station is sitting over the top of one of the planets all the time. Built, actually, like we call it printing, like, but it's like imagine like a giant 3D printer. It's actually building this planet in space. And then on the planet, there's usually about 30 or so facilities, and each facility has a different type. There's farms and research and factories, and they give all kinds of different buffs to the game. So there might be a shotgun factory, which increases once it's built, then the quality of shotguns, the top potential for shotguns goes up. Or there's a research facility that's researching a new, we call them sparks in our game, but they're like gems in Diablo. Like they're little like buffs that are kind of controllable. And so you have to research to make better and better gems or sparks kind of over the season. And so whatever you choose to do as a player, any of those things you do affects the game in some way. So our player's going to explore a bunch and try to find all the planets first and see what all the buffs they could build is, or are they going to work on the planet and build out all the buffs on that one planet before doing something else? And so it's a very communal approach to like whatever it is players decide to do is how the system will build. And then basically how it works is the culmination of a season is when the whole system is built, and then we have a thing at the end called a star seed. Basically we are beginning to build the seed for next season, and then once the seed is done, then that starts a whole new solar system, and everybody moves over there, and it's new planets and new things to explore and new bad guys to fight and stuff. So hopefully that makes sense. But that's how players basically, that's how you contribute to the sort of evolution of the season.
So are all of the players is everybody that's playing it at the same time contributing to the same development?
And then it doesn't matter, cool. And it doesn't matter, like, so that's what's fun. So there's some things that are space only, like the Explore, and there's some things that are ground only, like the planet side missions. But each time you choose a mission, you just choose real time or turn based. Like you just make that choice each time you play a mission. So it's not like forever in the game you're making one choice. It's each time you play a mission, you choose how you want to do it. You also choose if you want to play it single player or co-op. And so it's up to you. If you can play them by yourself, or you can fire up with the team and go play these missions together, any of the four styles. And so, but we all contribute to the same metagame. So you could never play any of the other modes. And then there's another mode, which I should say, which is just for people who just want to get in and fight. We've got these things called void tears, which is void is kind of our enemy of this first season. And so when the void tears open up, they're actually destroying and pushing back the work the players are doing. And so there's missions where you go in and you just fight and push back the void to try to close the tears. And even those are like a progressive mission where the tear is moving between, like, if it goes all the way to torn, it destroys the thing, or if it goes all the way to close, then they go away. And each time you do a mission, you slightly move it one way or the other. So again, it'll be up to players to decide, do they close the tears when they open? Do they stop stuff from getting destroyed? So it's all very like connected. And then even on a planet, like to start another, when one planet is discovered, before you can even start building it, you have to build like a colony ship, which takes a bunch of work on one planet to get that ship constructed. So it's kind of like a 4X game mixed with like a turn-based like XCOM style game mixed with like a, I don't know, Wing Commander Privateer style thing. And then there's a whole ground combat game. And then you can also have combat in space, like inside a spaceship where you're running around on foot or whatever. So there's kind of a lot going on, but I hope that kind of explains it. It's like, so no matter what you do, you've got personal game where you're working on, you're collecting stuff, and it's a very like random item game. So you're always kind of building that up, and you're doing missions for factions, which unlock new skills for you. So there's a lot of personal development going on. And then there's a season pass, which is kind of, leveling through everything you can do in a season. But there's also the community growth, and so you're always kind of choosing which of those things you want to do and where's your priority. And it's gonna be really fun. I'm really excited for this first season just to see what people do. Does nobody do space? Does everybody do space? Like all that kind of stuff. It's gonna be really interesting to see how that impacts.
Absolutely. What player agencies will get up to. And I'm sure from your experience before, you've seen that sometimes people do surprising things when they get into games, sort of unexpected, activities. And yeah, so I'm definitely interested to see what people are interested in. And I love that there's, as you mentioned, kind of something for everybody. Or if you're in a different mood, as a player of a game, you might be in the mood to just go collect stuff someday and explore and look around. And then other days you're feeling a little more aggressive and you want to go take it out on somebody. So you've got kind of both options available to you in the combat styles. So it's going to be really cool to see that adapt into just people's daily lives, how they can participate, in this cooperative environment with everybody. And I didn't realize that everyone was in kind of doing the same, not doing the same thing, but working on the sort of same project together, which I think sort of lends to this sense of community, which is something that I do love about games, is that you're like, hey, you play that thing, hey, I play that thing. We're working on this same thing together.
Like community can't be undersold how critical that is for a game. And so like that was a big part of the design going in, is how do we build a game that will encourage community, that will make people want to play together, that will give you a sense of like, maybe I didn't get the gun I wanted today, but man, we finished that factory, or we closed that void tear. Like there'll be these cool sense of accomplishments from the player base for what they do. The other thing is, it's not just how do you feel that day, but like, we want to run on like mobile, and we have like the Sui device, and so like we're gonna run on like all kinds of stuff. And so like I don't know how people play shooters on phones, but they do it. But and we use Unreal, and so we're gonna support it. But like I think our game, the turn-based on a tablet, would be a blast, where you can kind of just have your tablet out and you're pushing your pieces around and it's turn-based and you're taking your time. Like, I think it's going to play really fun on a tablet. But maybe when you're home on your big PC or whatever, then you want to have like the full like 3D real-time stuff going on. So it's not even just mood. It's like, I think different devices may lend to just better gameplay. But I don't know. There's people who love shooters on the phone, so we'll support it.
But there's also like, players that will play a shooter and then they want to switch to a turn-based game, and you have to leave that game normally, but you can stay in the same game and play and get both of your fixes in and continue the game in the same, you don't have to leave it. And what's interesting with our team is it's kind of a split divide of who prefers shooters and who prefers turn-based games. But now it seems like a lot of people are kind of crossing over and saying, I actually really like this over here. And so within our team, we're actually like cross-pollinating preferences, which actually helps cross-pollinate ideas too, like taking ideas from one style and putting them over to the other style, and it's making the whole game kind of bloom in a way. But it's you can see it in real time with our actual team, people starting to try other types of gameplay that they normally wouldn't ever play. And they're warming up to it. Like people are really not into turn-based on our team are now actually starting to be or preferring it in a way. It's really cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been my experience as a player, is sort of waking up to different play strategies or play styles. Because I was just exposed as a kid to racing games. I think a lot of people had the original Mario Kart and things of that nature. So that was really where I started and kind of cut my teeth with gaming. And I don't think I played a turn-based game for years. And when I first tried them, I didn't understand them. And I think that's kind of what prevented me from getting into it as a player. And I see that a lot with people that I know that like games. So if they started in one realm, it is very difficult to get into the other realm, because sometimes, the rules can be prohibitive for that other play style. But if you're in a game that naturally lets you choose and it's only for one mission, I feel like people are going to be more likely to want to try it for a single round. Say, hey, what happens? Do I hate this? I don't know. Let's try it. Let's see what happens.
So we did something to address that. We'll see if it's a good idea or a bad idea, but we made the introduction to the game like a little bit of the history of the universe that you play through, and you actually play through all 4 game modes. And so it's really small, like simple snippets of each, because I don't want someone to be like, I can't fly space and I can't get past this part, or I hate turn-based, I don't want to do this thing. And so it's a little bit risky in that, like, maybe we're pushing someone into a playstyle they don't like early, but the idea was to give you like a little taste of all 4 modes. And I think it takes about like 10 minutes or 15 minutes to play through the whole intro. And then you kind of, but at least that gives you like that little taste of them. And then when you get in the station, it's like, okay, what did I just like? I want to do more of that space fighting or ground fighting or whatever it is. And now you can just go hop in and do that gameplay. But I do hope that people will try more of the things. And I don't know, maybe it helps with burnout too, right? Like seasonal games, people can get really bored with them. And it's like, you could be like, this season I'm doing all space, or I'm doing all turn-based, or you know what I mean? Like, you could play our game so different every season, but all the items work across the different game modes. You're never limited. Like, you could get a cool gun from turn-based and then be like, oh man, I want to try this in real time, and go hop in real time and try firing that gun around and see what it's like.
Yeah, and I also feel like, what you were just saying, Kristen, about turn-based is kind of like overwhelming, not knowing how to play them. And you go into a brand new game, that's overwhelming too, because you don't know the story or the rules or anything. But if you are already playing the same game, you pretty much know what's going on in the game. And so all you have to do is learn the turn-based mode. You don't have to learn the whole history of the game or the whole, premise of it. You already have that. And so it might be a little easier to learn turn-based because you have everything else under your belt.
The other thing is I'm really trying to fight complexity, not make it too, like, I feel like that sounds silly when it took me an hour to describe the game, but so a lot of our systems, we're building them from a standpoint of like, you don't have, nothing is a requirement, everything is a bonus, is one of like our design philosophies. So instead of, to wear this plate mail, you have to have a strength of 10. And now people have to understand, well, what is strength and how do I get more strength? And there's like a lot that goes into knowing what that requirement is. Instead, our equipment, when you put it on, gives a bonus to whatever like the equivalent of strength is, which then gives bonuses to maybe melee attacks, or it maybe makes you move quicker. Or so everything is like a stacking bonus design instead of like a requirements design, which hopefully also makes it easier to get into the game and just.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that does reduce some of the, to sound very corporate for a minute, I think that does reduce a lot of the friction for somebody wanting to transition into something else. I think there's a lot of motivation too for, I have a lot of friends who like to game, but they are very much like real-time players. That's really where they like to focus, and they primarily spend their time gaming. But if it is a cooperative environment, then I might be able to convince one or two of them to go and try a different play style with me, and vice versa. Maybe they want me to get, a little bit better at shooters. I have terrible aim. I hate to admit that. It's true. Doesn't matter what I do. It's just terrible aim. And so it would be very cool for, for us to kind of exchange that style. And I think there's a lot of possibility for that. I can imagine for the team, it's probably difficult to showcase to an audience, any potential players, what Warped Universe is about, since there are a lot of options for players. Like, how has that been, trying to communicate with, the community and showcase what it is that you're offering, so people become, interested in what it is that you're building?
Hard, really hard, right? Because we talk about it all the time. We're like, what genre are we? What do we like? How do you describe? What's the elevator pitch? Like all that stuff. So we talk about that a lot, and I think we've got some decent answers for it. Like, we came up with fun sayings like "space at your pace." Like, I like that one a lot. Right. And so it's like, you can play a shooter, you can play turn-based, like there's all these different things you can do, but it's at the pace you want. And so stuff like that are like things that we're always, working on. And like one of the video editor guys, Obi, came up with this great thing where he took a screenshot of like two different video modes and then like rolled the die in the middle, and then you saw like the gun hit and the spaceship shoot, and then it was like the action stuff. So in like, I don't know, 10 seconds, you see it all. And I was like, amazing, you know what I mean? And so we're still working on that, because again, we can't say like our game is this game, but with weird graphics or something, you know what I mean? And so like we are kind of a really, like, it's one of the dangers of being like too original is that nobody knows what you are, and so then nobody plays your game.
It's also hard to explain a game before it's out yet. It's, it's easier to show it. And so you could spend forever just talking about it, and they won't know what you're talking about. But if you show that one clip that Obi made, it really makes it click in your head. Like, okay, I get it now. But when the game's not out yet and you can't show it yet, you have to talk about it. So it's this balance of like, what do we show and what do we say until we get to the point where it's out. And it's kind of a hit and miss. Like, we'll see what works and what doesn't, and then we. when
we first started, like, you always have the problem where you're your programmers are behind your artists, right? Like at the beginning, the artist is like, all right, let's make the game. And the programmers are like, there's no game at all yet, right? And so one of the things we did was we had this idea of like, Warp Universe is about taking people from Earth and bringing them into our universe. And so the artists started working on this trailer that's all in-game art, all made in Unreal, that tells the story of like showing up at the station on Earth and going down this elevator and then hitting through the warp portal before you like head into Warp Universe. And so they were able to kind of like work on that and buy us a little bit of time on the game development side to like catch up a little bit with them. And so like that's another thing we tried to do to try to make it more relatable. So one of my favorite designers of all time is Richard Garriott, and he always talked about like all of his games. I don't know if you've played any of his like Ultimas or anything like that, but they always start on Earth. It's always like you're going from Earth and you relate bringing the player into this other place. And so I've always wanted to do that ever since talking to him about it, you know? And so like, it's something we did where it's like, hey, we're bringing people from Earth, wherever you are on Earth, you're coming into this portal and then we're all going into this crazy warped universe together. And so it's, if you haven't seen it, it's a neat trailer, and Adam did all the music, and I'll never forget like the feeling of like it's all like building excitement and trying to get you in there, and so it got us all excited as a team just watching it. So we'll send you that link too afterward, but like you should check it out. Like it's a cool video, and it got our artists thinking about like how do they make the assets and what our characters look like, and it was all just the Earth side of stuff, so we weren't giving away any cool the game stuff we were doing yet, and like I don't know, stuff like that is what you have to be sort of really creative when you're really small.
Yeah, absolutely. Finding ways to communicate with your audience can be tough. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Adam.
Oh, no, not at all. I was just saying, yeah, it's also kind of, we built it so it's kind of slow building. It's a video that kind of builds and builds and builds, and it doesn't show the actual gameplay. And so it's kind of a risk to put that out because you give a different impression of what the gameplay is, but it also was unique and different than what most people have seen, and it stood out in a way. So I think it really helped, make us stand out in a way. You feel emotionally invested after you spend the 5 minutes watching it because you feel attached to it. But it is, it's a risk to make people sit for 5 minutes to watch something, especially in this day when people want those fast clips and stuff. But I think it really played off.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'd love to see it.
We based it loosely off of Half-Life, which is like one of my favorite games. And like the beginning of that game, you're kind of on a train and you're kind of going into the research lab, and then everything goes long and the portals open up and aliens start coming out, and then by the end of it, it's a shooter where you're shooting all these aliens in this lab. But the beginning, it's like, welcome to the station. So we use that as sort of like a beat for us, right? Of like a storytelling beat of like, are we moving at a good enough pace? Is the story interesting enough? Like, is it getting weird fast enough? Like all that kind of stuff. And so it was a really fun exercise just to like watch that video a million times, like the intro to Half-Life, and then kind of like doing the same thing with us, where it's like you're going from like, this world is very normal, it's Earth, right? I'm on a boat and I'm going to what looks like an oil rig or something in the ocean, right? And so everything starts very normal, and by the end nothing is normal at all, and it's kind of setting you up to go into this really weird world that we made.
Scott was the grounding force. Like we kept on coming up with different ideas, and he's like, "No, guys, watch the Half-Life video." And I think he posted like 100 times, just like, "Watch the Half-Life video. We gotta watch it. And, stick to that. It works. That's the one that works." It's true.
That's incredible. Yeah, I think I'd love to see it because I watched the trailers that are currently on the Steam page, and I loved how, one, the music is really good, which I'm sure that probably you're aware of. It makes you pretty amped up to see what's going on, and I thought it did a pretty good job of showing the features that the game will have, and I'm sure that took a lot of debate just to decide what to put in and what to highlight, and it looks incredible. And so yeah, I would definitely love to see that piece, because yeah, as you've mentioned, I don't know, I'm even this way, and I hate to admit it. I think somebody did some research recently that our attention span as humans is down to about 45 seconds, which is pretty wild. Yeah. I believe it too. It's pretty intense, and you can see this on social media, I'm sure from your experience there as well, that it's hard to get people to watch even a minute of film. But I'm glad that the team's been, trying to kind of take that challenge on, because I do think I think this game is going to be really, really awesome, and I'm excited to see what people build together, what the environment looks like, what choices players decide to make, because probably, as you mentioned, a bunch of people are going to work on one specific task. There's always going to be a few that are like, I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna do this thing. There's always a few mavericks, to reference the dog fights. There's always a few that have to go and kind of do their own thing. And so I think there's a ton of stuff that people can enjoy in the world. And something that we touched on a bit is the visuals of the game and what the art looks like, which for me, as a person with a background in art and design, has really, really increased my appeal to this game, because it is very unique looking, as you mentioned. What has the process been to develop this incredibly unique style? Is it something that has to kind of repeatedly, I'd imagine there's a lot of iteration and a lot of redesigning. What has it been like to create this sort of visual immersion for Warped Universe?
So we had a great, one second before I go. So I just went on Steam while we were chatting. The second video on Steam, it says some intro cinematic, is that video I was just talking about. So if people want to see, if they go to Warp Universe on Steam, or they can go to our website, warp.games. But if you go on there, the first video shows like the gameplay and actual footage stuff, and then the second video is that intro cinematic I was talking about. So the art style. So we were talking about this for a while, just like the TIE Fighter sound example. Like, how do you come up with a style that's cool and fun, but also like, we're not a $1 billion studio. And like I talked to Adam about this a lot. This is one of my biggest learnings as a game developer, is being AA is the worst thing you can be. Like, that's the first thing, how people judge your game. Then when they make a snap decision on your game, is the graphics. And so there's this want. It's kind of like Uncanny Valley, people talk about with like character faces, where the closer you get to human, the worse it is until you sort of cross that threshold. Games is the same thing. So no one looks at Minecraft and complains about the graphics. It's supposed to look like that, right? And then there's a bunch of other just amazing, gorgeous games like Flow. I don't know if you ever played Flow on the PlayStation, but like beautiful, gorgeous game, very simple graphics, but insanely good graphic style, right? What's the flower one? Also was amazing. Where it was like super simple, and you flew over these fields of grass and flowers, and you were sort of like bringing it to life, and it's this gorgeous game. And so it's like, you got to know your limitations of your team. And if I try to build something, like, I don't want to build a game that looks like Star Citizen, because Star Citizen has $700 million on their budget. You know what I mean? And so like, we're not in that league. And so the worst thing I can do is build a game that looks almost as good, right? So you really have to focus on, it's a hard lesson to learn, because just me as a game developer, I'm always like, I'm looking at all the bells and whistles of like this new shader tech, and you know what I mean? And it's like, we want it all, right? And so finding a style that's cool and beautiful, and like, thankfully our art director Peter's amazing. And he was a sculptor before I pulled him into gaming a million years ago. And so he's like a traditional artist first. And we just worked on these ideas. And we finally came up with this idea one night, super late. I think we were all on Telegram or something, super late, just sort of brainstorming ideas with our concept guy and going back and forth. And we had this, and we were like, what does it mean to be warped? And what does it mean to be in this different universe? And we had this idea, this kind of epiphany of like, what if you're sharp and detailed, but the world is more painterly and imaginative? And so like, and then the contrast of those two things existing together is really interesting. And like, we came up with this one shot of our first character standing in front of this wall with like a very painted, so it looked like a painting behind him, but like a high detail modern game character kind of standing in front of it. And it was that image that we all said, that's it, right? Like, it was an amazing moment. We were all like, that's our style. That's going to make us stand out and be different. And since then, we've iterated and iterated. Even, it's funny, watching the old gameplay on Steam, I'm just like, it's way better now. You know what I mean? Like, all this stuff. But like, that's the idea, is that the Warped Universe is this weird, painterly, it's about the players and creativity and imagination and all this kind of fun stuff. going on. And so it's not supposed to be hyper realistic, but we're high tech. So we're these cool high tech instruments that are going into this weird painterly world and running around. And it's the sort of the difference between those two, right? As you're playing around, it's not supposed to feel like you fit here, right? You're supposed to feel different than it. And then when you're on our station, everything on the station's high res and everybody in there is sharp, and that's where you see all the other players and stuff. But when you go into these worlds, they're meant to be different. But yeah, I'll never forget that night. It was awesome. Like, we were all just like, we did it. This is it. This is our style. But it took a while to get there.
Well, I think for a while we were talking about sci-fi movies that we liked and different movies, and like what do we want to shape it for? And then we started looking at the concept art that was made for those movies, like the concept art for Blade Runner, and we're like, oh, that's even cooler. Like, what, instead of like concepting it into a game, why don't we just make our game look like concept art in a way, like the watercolor paintings and stuff? And then that's where the whole painterly idea came from, applying that look from the original concepts of sci-fi movies versus taking influence from the movies themselves. And then the high detailed character makes you feel special in those environments. It makes you stand out and pop, and that difference is really what really stands out.
But not just sci-fi. It was like early 60s sci-fi is what we were looking at, right? Like, we're with the weird, where the monitors were these big round balls with the monitor in the middle of them. And it's kind of, what's the airport that's that way that they use for Men in Black? Is it Washington? I can't remember, but like Men in Black has that style where it's like an old 60s style, but it's still very high tech somehow. We were really like, that's fun. And so again, it was like, how do we be warped and different? And we kind of like warped had this like 60s vibe to it, kind of, you know what I mean? And so we were sort of like thinking about that stuff. And so that also really influenced a lot of our early art decisions, was just simple shapes, you know what I mean? Weird ovals and circles and stuff that doesn't always fit in sci-fi, and so like, again, trying to be different. Like Adam said, we're not silver steel spaceships. Like, that's not our game at all. And then our ships, even like from the one you're looking at there, all the new stuff Peter's done since then is way weirder and funner, and it's cool.
That's so exciting. No, it's going to be so cool to see. I'm glad you brought up Blade Runner, because it was something that like I felt like those aesthetics matched really well. You've got this sort of like gritty, sort of dark-ish environment, and these bright neon lights, and this like immense visual contrast between those two things. And it's forever will be one of my favorite movies visually is Blade Runner, and the art for that film is phenomenal. So it's
not
really
just phenomenal.
Cool to see.
It's what's the word? Like, it created a genre, right? Yeah. Like all the cyberpunk and all that other kind of stuff is all built on everything, all the groundwork that Blade Runner did, right? And so it's like they created a whole genre and style that's just so cool.
It's rad. They have a tabletop RPG of it now too.
It's great. I mean, but those are the worlds you remember. We talk about that a lot. Like, another example I'll give is Fallout. We're not like Fallout, but I always gave Fallout as an example to the team of like, this is how you do a genre right. Like, everything in Fallout feels like it belongs there. The music, the style, how people talk, like, Fallout is such a masterpiece of design, you know what I mean? And so it's like, use this as an example of like, this is the gold standard of like, how do you create a style, something that's your own, you know what I mean? And like, Fallout just hammered it, right? Like, it's amazing, and it keeps working over and over and over because they built this great style. But the music's funky and it's different. It's like, what is that, 30s style or whatever music, and like, it's so good. It's just so good.
I'll throw that radio channel on YouTube once in a while just to listen to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. Like, but to me, it's like just an example of like, that's where you should be setting your sights, right? Is, again, it's like, if you're going to make a world that people are going to want to be a part of, again, community building, right? Like, well, I want to, it's one of the mistakes I've made. I'm a big post-apocalyptic guy. Like, so I love Fallout on like Wasteland before that and stuff. And so one of the first games I did was called Auto Assault, which was a car combat MMO, post-apocalyptic. But it turns out that like, people don't really want to live in that world. It's like a desolate, ugly. So it's not a super inviting MMO. Like, well, maybe it's cool for storytelling, but it's not really like hey, let's all come live together in the wasteland. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's like making a world that's just like colorful and interesting and exciting is actually also important as part of community.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's
Yeah, it's got to
something
be quirky
that
in a way. Like,
Helldivers did. Sorry, go ahead.
oh yeah, oh yeah. We talk about Helldivers a lot in our team too. We're obsessed with it.
It's a great game. I
But
love how
Helldivers has
balanced
that.
it feels. Yeah.
They have that element of like they're one of the best community games made, I think, right? Because again, it's that map and there's the planets and they're being attacked and you kind of understand what you're doing in the game. Like you know why you're fighting, where you're fighting, and you know what will happen if you win this fight, kind of a thing. And so it adds a ton to game. Like I think Helldivers is fantastic. And so it's like, but like, if you're talking community games, I think it's maybe one of the best ones out there right now because it really is a great, like, it's a positive. Like, go read their forums. Everyone's like having fun and talking, and players love chatting with each other. Versus like go on any shooter game, and it's the most toxic online environment you can imagine. You know what I mean? And so that's not what we want. We want a place where you want to come and you want to be with other people and stuff. So we've had a few people be like, but I want PvP and I want to kill, and I'm like, then we're not your game, right? Like that's not what we are.
In the right place. Yeah, absolutely. Like I think that's something that I crave a lot in games is, Call of Duty has great graphics. I can't deal with the interactivity between players on the platform. It's horrible.
Like, there's no other word for it. It's a toxic environment. But like there's a lot of people who love that stuff and like, cool, go play that game. It's just, that's not us,
Yeah.
It's not.
With Helldivers, I love it because like everyone's together for democracy. It's like you're just together. It's almost like you're playing dress up all together for this one thing to have fun together online. It's like cosplay online almost, like where everyone's there for a cause to kill bugs and robots, and everyone says the same like terms and slogans. The propaganda, they're all into it for just having fun together. There's no animosity between each other. And you see like the top level players come, you get in with a mission with a top level player and they help you out. They're friendly and they want to guide you around. It's such a great community game.
Well, everybody knows that the bigger the community, it's better for them too, right? Right? Like the whole point is if there's more people fighting to free this planet, then it'll get freed sooner. And so you're motivating players to have the actions that you want them to do, right? Where like a toxic shooter, you get in and someone's insulting you the entire time and stuff, and you're like, I'm never playing this game again, right? Like it's like, at least I am. You know what I mean? And so it's like that. Again, it all goes into design. But yeah, Helldivers is fantastic. Yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, that is something that I've really liked about community games for sure. Like Helldivers has been great because, my friends that I play it with in real life will throw a beer can in the trash and shout like, how about a nice cup of liberty? Like it's something that you absorb and it becomes part of your life outside the game, and it's very silly and fun, and that's something that I really love about games, and I'm really excited to try this one. And it sounds like the team is working on play testing. Are you currently working on play testing, or
so we call it the game loop, basically, which is like, so the first thing we did was we had to get an art style and kind of make some decisions about the design. And then the next big milestone for us was the introduction, where it was like, here's a little taste of all 4 gameplay modes. And that took a long time because it's like, to get a gameplay mode is camera controls and movement speeds and input control and all these other things that if they're not all right, it's bad. Like it's a bad experience. And so we had to get 4 different play styles all to feel good and be fun and understandable and easy enough to play, and we did that. And then the next part was like, okay, now you've made like the foundation of the game. Now we need to go make it real. Like we need to make real inventory and real client server stuff and player authorization and all these other things that go into being an online game. And so that's what we've been working on sort of since then, and that's our kind of next big milestone that I hope we'd be there already, but we're not. It's just how it is when you're a small team, but like we're close. And so when that is done, we'll have so much for people to do and play already, even though we won't have lots of skills and lots of weapons and lots of planets. We'll have the ones we have are fun and you can replay them over and over and you can roll new items and you can add new upgrades. And so like all of those things will be functional. And so as soon as that's done, as soon as we can, literally, we're going to start putting people in, but we're small and I just can't even process feedback from a lot of people at the same time. And so the first people we're going to let in are just going to be like our biggest sort of diehard community people who've been around for a while and given us feedback. So we're going to just basically roll people in slowly and then let them give us feedback and then address all their stuff and then bring in the next wave. And then that's kind of early access at its heart, right? Is like, that's the point of it. And so we made up a thing called Season 0, which is basically the season before the season. And so our whole early access point will be Season 0, where we'll go from a handful of players to eventually open and just let as many people in. And that's when we're testing like our servers and, balance of like too many people at the same time and all those kind of issues at the end. And then when all of that's done, we'll start Season 1. And that'll be sort of the first sort of true season of the game. But, again, we're small and we're trying to get people in as fast as we can. So that's why we came up with this idea of Season 0 is basically people, and it's kind of, the story of it is kind of almost a backstory still of like, it's the first time we've ever built a universe together. So we're sort of building in the fiction of like, there's going to be bugs and crazy stuff going wrong. And if, only the bravest are going to want to come into Warp Universe now when things are so crazy, you know what I mean? And then by Season 1, we'll have it all hopefully ironed out and kind of be the sort of official launch. But I hope that a lot of people play in Season 0, but we'll see. Not everybody likes early access.
That's true. I'm going to kind of break the fourth wall for just a moment here, so people kind of can join. If you're watching this, make sure that you join Warped Games on Discord. I've been lurking in there for a little bit, just watching what's going on. Make sure that you join on Discord. Also make sure to follow these guys on Steam, so you can kind of get some updates. If you do want to join one of the early playtests, maybe, we'll see. So you can find out a little bit more there. And is there another place where people might be able to find you online, or are those kind of your primary points of contact for your audience?
I can answer if you want. So we
Discord
have YouTube.
Is the main one. Okay.
Yeah, we have YouTube, we have Steam, we have Epic. And so the best thing for us is wishlist. That's the thing that helps us more than anything else, is wishlisting our game on one or both of those places. And you can get to the links for either of those from warp.games, our main site. But that's the way we get the stores to care about us, is the more people that wishlist, the more they'll promote us. And so that's kind of our primary push right now, is if people can wishlist us. And then if you're interested in early testing, what I tell everybody is get involved, be active on our community boards and stuff. It's really easy to see who the active people are.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. And is there anything else that you would like to cover about the game, or anything that you would like to say to your potential audience or players if they want to come and join the join the mayhem?
Amanda, I feel like I covered all what the game is. It's like, if you want a community, if you like community games and you like what we've presented in at least one of those kinds of combat, then I think you might think Warp Universe is fun, and I hope you'll come check it out. And there's really one of our designers, Obi, and our writer Mike have been working a lot. So Steam has these great, where are those? They're in community. But they write up these great articles in the community hub on Steam. They write up these great articles where they'll go really in depth and like, how does itemization work? Or so if you really want like details about the game, they've written these great, super in depth, like each one's like a page and a half, sort of like really interesting articles about all kinds of stuff about the game. So if you want to learn more, that's almost the best place to get really cool detailed information.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely drop the links in the video description so people can join in, and definitely wishlist the game. It's important. Also, if you do happen to play the game at some point, whether it's in early access or later, reviews help a lot too. So making sure to leave reviews for the developers really, really helps to make sure that things can proceed as necessary. Bugs are natural. Building something completely from scratch that's entirely your own, there's going to be some hiccups. But yeah, Warped Universe looks so sick, and I'm really excited to see it because, I think we share a lot of similar favorite games, favorite titles, and things that we want to pull together and, experience a brand new thing. And yeah, I'm definitely psyched to play that game and try out some different play styles. And yeah, maybe I'll try to sneak into one of the play tests in the future when there's a spot open.
We'll definitely make sure that you're on the list so you'll get notifications notifications as soon as we start inviting and stuff. And then the other thing is, if you're ever interested in doing like a like play along or something, we could do that too. Where like you could fire it up and then we could sit there with you and talk about like what you're seeing, what's going on, and you could ask questions about it and stuff. And so we could kind of do like a live stream of that or something too. Is pretty fun. It's a way more interesting way than me just rambling about the game.
Sure. Yeah, I would absolutely love to do that because I think, like you said, that's really fun to watch and be involved with. And, you know, one person that I was live streaming with once was like, oh, I get to see all my bugs happen in real time. And I was like, we're learning together. We're finding all this stuff that can get sorted. But yeah, I would absolutely love to. So any time. And I know that, you know, developmental delays, they happen, and so there's no end date to the invitation for coming on IGO. Yeah, so anytime I'd be happy to host.
Yeah, trust me, it's not hard talking about the game. We love it.
Same. I could talk about games all day, so hence IGO's existence. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for your time today. I really appreciate you taking a moment to chat with us and the audience. And otherwise, I'll be in touch. Just to give you some kind of brief background, we had a video editor, and it's kind of a long story. They had some family stuff take place. So our release timeline has kind of changed for some of the interviews. I'm in the process of kind of getting that organized. But as soon as I figure out when it's going to be released, I'll be in touch just so you can kind of be appraised of what's going on. So it might be a little bit before I'm in contact, but I promise I haven't forgotten about you. I would like to do, make sure the video looks good. I can kind of video edit, but I'm not very good at it. So I want it to look really good when it comes out, so people get excited about joining your title.
That's awesome. I mean, we'll share it everywhere. So I really appreciate you having us on here.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you so much again. And I hope you have an absolutely wonderful evening in whatever time zone you find yourself in.
All right. Thank you. You too.
Sounds good.
Thanks. Bye-bye, y'all.
Bye.